I didn't say a word when the HOA president accused me of environmental vandalism. She stood there in front of a dozen residents, clutching her binder of bylaws like it was the Constitution, her voice trembling with fake authority. I just unrolled the letter from the State Department of Natural Resources, stamped, signed, and sealed, declaring my yard an officially recognized wildlife habitat under state and federal conservation law. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The board's lawyer leaned over, read the heading, and quietly whispered something to her. I think it was the first time in her life she realized she had absolutely no power in the room. It wasn't always like this. When I first moved into this neighborhood, Primera wanted peace, not a power struggle. My wife and I had spent years in the city, where every sunrise sounded like sirens, and every weekend was just recovery from the week before. When we found this little cul-de-sac on the edge of the woods, I thought we'd finally discovered a place to breathe. The property was modest, a single-story brick home with a sloping backyard that dipped into a small creek. The soil was rich, black, and full of life. I used to kneel in it for hours, planting herbs and native flowers my grandmother once showed me in her own garden back in Kentucky. The scent of mint and wild sage would drift through the screen door in the evenings. It wasn't just a yard, it was a memory, a connection. Something pure I thought no one could take issue with. The HOA brochure we got before moving in described the neighborhood as community-focused and nature-conscious. That line actually made me smile. I figured that meant they'd appreciate the native landscaping. I wanted to build pollinator-friendly plants, bird baths, maybe a small pond. I wasn't trying to turn the place into a jungle. I just wanted to make something alive. But apparently, in their world, nature-conscious meant uniformly sterile. The first letter came 3 months after we moved in. It was taped to my front door. Bold red font. No greeting. Justa listo violations. My garden beds did not conform to the approved landscape plan. My unauthorized plantings disrupted visual continuity. I remember standing on my porch, reading it out loud to my wife, who thought it had to be a mistake. Visual continuity? She asked. What? Like we're painting a wall? We laughed it off that night, thinking a simple conversation would clear things up. It didn't they? 2 weeks later, I got a second notice. This one came with a threat of daily fines if I didn't restore the lawn to HOA-approved condition. The kicker, they included a photograph, a zoomed-in shot of my wildflowers, with arrows pointing at them like they were contraband. I called the HOA office, explained that everything I planted was native and within my property line. The woman on the phone sounded bored. She said, "If it's not in the community's design manual, it's not allowed." When I asked for a copy of that manual, she told me it was for board use only. That's when something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry yet. More intrigued. Like a puzzle had been set in front of me, and I needed to figure out how deep it went. I tried diplomacy first. I wrote a polite email to the board, cited the state's pollinator initiative, attached photos of my garden supporting monarch butterflies, and even invited them to stop by for coffee to see it in person. No reply. A week later, I got another fine notice. Tease time for unapproved garden structures. They were referring to a small wooden trellis holding up my bean vines. That's when I realized this wasn't about aesthetics. It was about control. I went to the next HOA meeting in person, dressed neatly, holding printouts of my correspondence. They barely let me speak. The president, a retired realtor named Malena, interrupted me halfway through my sentence to say, "The rules. The rules, sir. We can't make exceptions." When I pointed out that my yard actually improved drainage in the area, she rolled her eyes. Another board member said my unmanaged vegetation could harbor pests. I almost laughed. These people had artificial turf in their backyards and pesticide trucks visiting twice a month. But sure, my milkweed was the threat. That night, after the meeting, I sat at my desk and looked over the stack of letters, fines, and meeting minutes I'd collected. I realized something important. They'd never once cited the actual bylaw was violating. Every notice used vague language, inconsistent with neighborhood standards, non-conforming landscaping. I started reading the HOA's governing documents line by line. It turns out, the landscaping clause was barely a paragraph long. It only covered lawn maintenance and debris removal. Nothing about native plantings or gardens. That's when the lawyer in me, well, not literally, but the spirit of one woke up. I spent nights researching state law, especially environmental protection statutes. I discovered that my state had a wildlife habitat incentive program, backed by the Department of Natural Resources. It encouraged homeowners to create eco-friendly spaces for pollinators, birds, and small wildlife. Exactly what I was doing. Even better, it preempted local ordinances and association rules that tried to prohibit such efforts. The law basically said that recognized wildlife habitats were protected from aesthetic regulations, including HOA restrictions. So primera, apply. I filled out the forms, took photos of every native species on my property, documented the soil composition, and submitted everything to the state agency. The process took weeks, and during that time, the HOA kept sending fines. I didn't respond. I just filed them in a folder labeled evidence. When the certification finally arrived in the mail, I held the envelope like it was a court summons. It came with a metal sign, green, embossed with a state seal, Certified Wildlife Habitat. I remember smiling in the quiet of my kitchen, thinking, this is going to be fun. The next HOA meeting, I showed up early. The agenda listed landscaping enforcement updates. Perfect. When my turn came, I calmly placed the official certificate on the table. The room went silent. Malene leaned forward to read it, her glasses slipping down her nose. I explained, politely, that under state law, my property now qualified as a protected conservation habitat, and any further attempts to fine me could be considered interference with a certified ecological site. Their attorney asked to see the statute. I handed him the printout, highlighted and tabbed. He read quietly, his face slowly changing color. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just said, I'd also like to request that all prior fines be rescinded and my account cleared. The lawyer whispered something to Marlene. She looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. "Will, review this," she said finally. I smiled. "Take your time." A week later, I got a letter. Not taped to my door this time, but mailed formally. The HOA regretted any misunderstanding and confirmed that all fines had been dismissed. They even noted that they would update future policy to reflect compliance with state environmental standards. I framed that letter. Word spread through the neighborhood, fast. A few of my neighbors started planting milkweed and native shrubs after hearing about my certification. One even asked me for the DNR's contact info. By spring, 3 more yards had registered as habitats. You could almost feel the shift, like the whole street was quietly rebelling, one flower bed at a time. Marlena, meanwhile, resigned 2 months later. The official reason was health concerns, but everyone knew she just didn't want to deal with what she called the garden people. The HOA board shrank from 7 members to 4. Meetings became shorter. Notices became rare. Now, when I walk through my yard, it hums with life bees, finches, the occasional fox that slips through at dusk. The once sterile lawns around me have started to look human again. There's color, scent, movement. Some neighbors still keep their manicured grass, but no one complains about mine anymore. They wave, sometimes awkwardly, like they're not sure if I'm a hero or a nuisance. Either way, it's fine, because I didn't do this to win a fight. I did it to protect something worth keeping, and that little green sign by my gate, the one that says Certified Wildlife Habitat, does more than mark a victory. It's a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is just letting life grow exactly where they tried to kill it.